All right, jacked up September 3rd, 2024, back at you with after a week hiatus on the show. Glad to be back with you as we get set for week 2 of the college football season. Week 1 in the National Football League. Football, ladies and gentlemen, is back. Fired up to talk about it. Fired up to get your opinions as well. Joining the show, longtime friend, former NEWS9 reporter, and current reporter anchor at WLOS, our sister station of Asheville, North Carolina. Ed DiOrio with us on the program, ladies and gentlemen.
Look at that. The applause. You're too kind.
All the people in the audience, I'm happy to have you back on board, and I'm happy to have you as well. What's up, buddy?
Happy to be back, and I would be happy to be back in any time of the year, but when you said let's talk football, that just it gets a different feeling out of you, man. So this is a great week to be joining you, and there's a lot of excitement in the air for a lot of different reasons and for a lot of teams, and we're going to talk about them, I have a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I love to have you on because, back to our college days and the first couple of years you were out here with us, that's all we did was, talk about sports and I respect your opinion. So let's get it going. Let's talk a little bit about the first couple weeks in college football, week 0 and week 1. I guess my first question is, who's the biggest disappointment and why is it your favorite team in Florida State?
I have liked Florida State for a long time, as Jack knows. And if you're not familiar with me, you just found out. But I think it boils down to, I texted it to you and a few other friends the other night after they lost to Boston College. They dropped 0-2. Man, there's a reason why DJU's been to 3 schools in 3 years, man. I understand the transfer portal is a fun idea and, you can go anywhere you want, but there might be an element of maybe you're just not in the right place and you're not doing so hot. Let's take it back to another situation that maybe some more fans and viewers in the Ohio Valley can relate to. Look at JT Daniels. JT Daniels was at like 5 schools in 6 years or something like that. West Virginia, one of them. You keep bouncing around like that, it's not a good sign. And DJU is kind of a good example. I think he's showing that I don't know if he's just not a good fit. He's not they're not exposing his abilities as best that they could. Mike Norvell's a good coach. I think he's proven that. Back-to-back double-digit win seasons, very, very close to a college football, almost in my eyes, and many others should have been a college football playoff inclusion last year. I don't think it's that. I think it comes down to there is a lot of turnover, right? You're missing your top 2 wide receivers, your top quarterback from last year, and your running back. Those are hard positions to fix, man. And the ACC, it's not getting as much love as say the Big 10 or the SEC, the revamped super conferences that we're getting. After this week, the ACC has 5 ranked teams in the top 25. So I'm not saying all those are playoff contenders, but the conference is getting better around to Florida State and even a Clemson. Clemson got lost by 30. Now, granted, that was to Georgia, but you kind of expected a better fight, maybe some more points on the board. But I do think that the ACC is better than maybe people give it credit for, at least coming into this year. They're more enamored with the Big 10, SEC, maybe even the Big 12. But, Florida State's definitely up there. It's the talk of the town as far as the disappointment and all the people that were dancing on their grave last year, glad they weren't made the playoffs. They're still dancing now. And,
I just like giving you a hard time.
No, it's understandable. And even in today's landscape of college football, with the transfer portal and everything in between, your team is so different from last year to this year. And on a transition point, I feel like that note can be applied to the Pitt Panthers. They look like a whole different offense.
And
I know we'll get to it, but
and you made a good point with the transfer portal. In football, whether it's at the professional level or the collegiate level, more now than ever, I think football is centered around how good your quarterback is. If you've got a good quarterback, you've got a team that's going to be able to win you some ball games. And with these teams like Florida State this year and Pitt last year, when you put all your eggs into a transfer portal quarterback basket, DJ Uyunglele for Florida State this year, Phil Dracovic with Pitt last year, and it doesn't work out. That snowballs into bad juju, bad momentum, and then all of a sudden you lose your locker room and you start losing games that in the hindsight you think you could win. Like if that gets to the point now with Florida State, and I know the fans were clamoring for the backup with loud cheers against Boston College. I forget the kid's name, but
Brooklyn.
Yeah, we want Brock. I mean, they were loud cheers. I mean, it might get to the point where he becomes a starter and DJU gets benched, and then Florida State fans can look back at the game against Boston College and Georgia Tech and think, man, if this kid was in the whole time, we would have won those games. I know as a Pitt fan, I look at the WVU game, the Cincinnati game, and think if Nate Yarnell or Christian Veillere, who ended up not being that good, were in instead of Phil Dracovic, Pitt, I don't think Pitt goes 3-9. So like you run into these problems with the transfer portal, especially with how quarterback heavy the portal has been and how quarterback heavy football is in general. You swing and miss, and you find out relatively early if you're swinging and missing on a transfer portal QB, you're screwed. And I think that's boded bad for Pitt in the past with Keaton Slovis, even though the year he was here, Pitt was able to win 9 games. And right now, all signs are pointing to it being a good thing with Eli Holstein. It's either boom or doom for teams in the transfer portal for quarterbacks. And if you miss on it, if I'm a Florida State fan, I'm concerned because right now it's like you said with him, 3 schools in 3 years, something's got to tell you, maybe it's just not, oh, I need a change of scenery. You're just maybe not good enough.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, yeah, I think transfer portal going all in on players like that is obviously risky. But man, I don't know what would be more deflating. That be your team, that idea be attached to your team like a Pitt, a Florida State, or the other side of it, which is you have a quarterback who's in-house, homegrown. You're expecting to progress because he's been in the system for a while, and you still don't see those results, at least as of week 1, which is West Virginia can attest to with Garrett Green.
Yep.
Clemson can attest to with Cade Klubnik. There are some teams out there where you're like, where's that step? He's been here all summer. He's been here all last year. He was the starter all last year. And in West Virginia's case, they had a good year last year, win total-wise. So obviously expectations through the roof. And when you play a team like Penn State, you're like, that's a good measuring stick off the top. And your team week 1 is not your team in week 12. But regardless, this is what week 1 football is all about, is overreacting to it. It's the small sample size you have to go off of. And if I'm a West Virginia fan, I don't know if I'm concerned necessarily, but I also think if you're a West Virginia fan and a true one that paid attention to all their games last year, you kind of realize that you were in close games. You pulled out a lot of close games. Was it luck? Or like, can you actually stack up with those teams that we talk about that are in playoff contention, like a Penn State? Because in the Big 12, the Big 12's wide open. There are 6 teams you could name that that could realistically win that conference. And West Virginia coming into this year, I think some people had as a dark horse, but one of them. So I think that the quarterback position, if it wasn't interesting enough, with the transfer portal and how college football is laid out nowadays, it might be as interesting as ever because of those dynamics we just talked about.
Yeah, and I think for when it comes to West Virginia, there might be a little bit of overreaction because, I mean, they brought a lot back. I mean, other than Zach Frazier, who obviously now plays for the Steelers, and we'll talk about the Steelers in a little bit, they bring back 4 guys on that offensive line: Tomas Remak, Jaquay Hubbard, Wyatt Milam, Brandon Yates, Nick Malone, guys that have like 90-plus college starts combined with the 4 of them that return. There's experience there. There's experience with Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. They bring back a couple of key receivers, transfer receivers. Like, there's too much going for West Virginia right now to think that all of those pieces are just going to have a giant regress and them not to. I'm not saying they're going to win 10, 11 games and win the Big 12, but I think game 1 against Penn State was more of the exception and not the rule for West Virginia.
I would agree, but to counterpoint to that, the Big 12 that they won a good amount of games in last year is not the Big 12 this year.
It's not. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I'm interested to see how, in a different landscape of a conference, what happens there.
Yeah.
And to the experience point, I agree that I think experience, like in their case with their offensive line, those guys, like I said, being in the room, they were there last year. They started for the Mountaineers last year. Same deal for other teams. This is another thing where the transfer portal comes into play. If you get a transfer junior who played last year at Oregon State or Utah State or whatever, they still have experience. They just didn't have experience with you. They're still experienced players, and they've been in those game situations. You know, when you talk about an experienced offensive line, you talk about guys who return with playing experience, and that's always been referred to as being on your team from last year. Now, when you talk about experience, you have to throw in the transfer portal. You have to throw in guys like, say what you want, it's not working out. But going back to DJ Uiagalelei, he's an experienced quarterback. He just doesn't have experience.
Very experienced quarterback, yeah.
Just not at Florida State. It's not translating. But my point is that, you know, you can have experience, it just not be all in-house. So
yeah, no, I agree 100%.
So I'm interested to see how West Virginia's season lays out with all of those. It's just so different from last year with the 12 team, with everything, the new conference alignments. I don't think putting a microscope up to West Virginia's last year is fair to this year's team.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And there are some teams that have to deal with that more than others. West Virginia with several new teams into the Big 12. Ohio State's another one. Ohio State's got to deal with a really good, or at least we thought that was going to be really good, Oregon team who was in a dogfight with Idaho. Washington, UCLA, USC all into the Big Ten now. I thought Ohio State looked really, really good in their opening game against Akron, as good as you can against, you know, the number 2 team taking on a MAC school at home in week 1. They were my pick, and let me know what you think about this. They were my pick to win the whole dang thing at the beginning of the year. I think Ohio State is talented. I think they're well-rounded. I think Chip Kelly being their offensive coordinator now is going to help. And honestly, like, it gets to the point where you know, from a baseball perspective, all of the small market teams complain about the Yankees and the Dodgers having $300 million payrolls, but sometimes it bodes well for them. Ohio State went out and spent $20 million in the transfer portal on this roster. You'd hope that if you invest that much money into this team, it has to turn out well for you. It might not, but they're my pick to win the whole thing this year.
It's nobody's going to bark at you for saying that. And I don't disagree, but I don't necessarily agree. I think the reason I had such a tough time picking a national champion this year was that I thought that my thought process is that everybody's just beating each other up. Yep. It's just these power conferences where Ohio State might have 1 or 2 losses going into the playoff that could hurt their playoff position if they don't win the conference. Same could be said for Oregon. Same could be said for Michigan. Same could be said for Penn State even. But like, that's why I kind of like a team out of, let's say, I don't know, the Big 12, or if it ain't going to be Georgia, who's it going to be in the SEC? I know you got all the big names, the Texas, the Alabama still there. But my problem, drawing this back to my point about Ohio State, is this. Ohio State, the constant battle they would have when it comes to national championship contention before, when it was the normal format in the 4-team playoff, was that, okay, if you can get past Michigan and Penn State, you're in. You're fine. You're representing the Big Ten. Yeah. You're in. You're fine. Now, not only do you have to get past Oregon, Michigan, Penn State when it comes to standings, even if you don't play them in the regular season, you have to get past possibly 3 rounds to get to the national championship if you don't win your conference. And Ohio State, that's a very real possibility. And I'm interested to see how, a guy like Will Howard is going to be thrust into this new role, this new spotlight per se. You ain't in Kansas State no more. Now, granted, he looked very good, and granted, it was Akron, but
he was highly sought after when he entered his name in the transfer portal too, and rightly so. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of unprovens, and we're going to find out a lot when they play Oregon, when they play. I mean, and the funny thing is, now with these super conferences, I like the matchup of Oregon, Ohio State early in the year. You're like, ooh, we're going to get a good game early. But those aren't, like I said before, those are not the same two teams that could potentially meet up in a playoff. I'd rather that game be in week 9 rather than week 2. But that's just how the conferences are, to where they're so loaded. You have to have Ohio State play somebody big early in the year. And that's the nature of it. But I think I don't disagree with you. I could see Ohio State winning it. But to me, I think a team like a USC has a better chance of making maybe a deeper playoff run, or being in a better position to win a national championship, because, if you win the Big 12, you're in that top 4. You're going to run into maybe a beat up Ohio State or a beat up Notre Dame. I just think Ohio State, if they don't win their conference, I doubt they can win the national title because of how far they have to go. But that's a question with every team. No teams had to go this far before with a 12 team. So that's the beauty of this year.
Do you have a pick to win the whole thing?
Man, I've thought about it. I've gone back and forth. I do think that Georgia's going to lose a game, maybe 2 in the regular season. I just think their schedule's way too hard for them not to drop at least 1. But it is hard to bet against them. But I would say, if it's not going to be Georgia, I think I already spoiled it. I love USC. I think Miller Moss is really
good.
He's really good. Lincoln Riley's a proven coach that's been there in the playoff before. And like I said, their conference strength, the Big 12 is good, but it's not new Big 10, new SEC good. And I think that they're going to benefit from – they're still going to play some legitimate teams to get them ready. But if they can get into those top 4 spots, I'm taking a rested USC in the Big 12 over a beat-up, already 2 rounds in Ohio State or Oregon or something like that. That's my reasoning. But if you were telling me, hey, Ed, you got to put money on USC, I'm not doing it. It's just,
and I'm with you. I mean, it is such. I feel confident in Ohio, and I do have money on the Buckeyes to win the whole thing. It was one of those preseason,
they're giving
at
you
the casino, throw $20 in the machine.
You're feeling good when you're feeling good.
Yeah, but like, I have a hard time, and I know you've been playing a lot of the college football 25 game, and as I've gone years and years into dynasty modes, it's like, I went 9-3, but I still made the playoff. And I'm thinking, it's a video game. But can you really say, it's just a video game comparison? I think we're going to get to the point where 3 lost teams are in this thing.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if a 3-loss team wins the national championship within the next 5 years, if not.
Same thing is like when the college football playoff and the 4 teams first started, Ohio State gets in at 4 with Cardale Jones, their 3rd-string quarterback, and wins the whole thing. And everybody's like,
1 loss. Like the 4 seed would usually only get, the 4 seed in the college football playoff before was only having 1. Has a 2-loss team ever gotten in? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. So that just goes to show you
who got in over Florida State last year. It was Bama, right?
Yeah, Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC. Correct. Yeah, they lost to Texas, and if they would have lost to Georgia, that would have been the nail in the coffin. But they beat them,
and one of Kirk Herbstreit had a TikTok with Lee Corso before the first game day, and Lee said, "I don't think any undefeated teams there are going to be any undefeated teams this year." And with the way that the landscape has changed in college football, that wouldn't surprise me either.
I do think it's going to be weird, though, to potentially see like 1 seed Georgia, hypothetical 1 seed Georgia, 12-1 or 13-1, Texas 12-2, and then the 3 seed be like, I don't know, USC at 9-3, but they're the 3 seed because they won the Big 12. Yeah. And then like Miami's the 4 seed because they have maybe 3 or 4 losses, but they won the ACC. Like, it's
going to get to the point, and I brought this up on my radio show Sunday morning. Like, all right, so let's say a team like, I didn't think Pitt was going to win the ACC in 2021 with Kenny Pickett when they did. And that was a good team. So like, let's just say a team like Pitt or Miami, who's I think a pretty good football team, not a great football team, but a pretty good one. They win the ACC. I think the ACC champion is probably the 4 seed and gets the bye.
It's a coin flip It's a coin flip between that and the Big 12 champion, I think. But yeah,
but like let's say it's okay, sure. But Georgia and Alabama is probably your SEC championship. Both of those teams are really, really good. You don't think so?
I mean,
Ole
Texas
Miss?
is still good. They got Quinn.
Okay, regardless.
Yeah.
One of those teams. I think the loser of the SEC championship is probably the 5 seed. Gets a home playoff game, wins against the highest ranked G5 team, whoever that'll be, Boise State. I'm not sure who else they're predicting that to be. But then you get
App State, baby.
The
Mountaineers.
You could get to a point where like a team like Georgia will play a team like Miami or Colorado or whoever wins that Big 12, and the team that doesn't win the SEC, that's the 5 seed or even the 6 seed going to take on the 3, will slaughter the 3 or the 4 seed. And I wonder how sustainable the format of the way that they have it is, because I think it's going to you're going to see it this year. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, Georgia wins the SEC. They're the 1 seed. They beat Bama in the SEC championship. Bama's the 5 seed. Bama plays Miami in the quarterfinals. Alabama might beat Miami by 5 touchdowns.
See, but that's also.
And then, like, if West Virginia or Colorado wins the Big 12, and whoever that 6 seed is, it's whoever loses the Big 10 championship. If it's Oregon, same thing.
See, but here's the thing. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee showed their hand last year that they want a better game and more of a market value for a game to be able to sell it to the public. I think they showed their hand with that with the Alabama pick over Florida State last year, because they didn't want Florida State to get killed by Michigan potentially. So they put Alabama in there. Let's go back to your hypothetical there, right? Let's say you have a 4-loss, 3-loss Miami, or for sake, whatever, West Virginia wins the Big 12 and they have 3 losses and they're the 4 seed, and they're staring down the barrel at the SEC runner-up and the 5 seed. Would they be staring down the barrel at that? Or would the committee put someone like, I don't know, an untested or a very not very much tested Notre Dame?
Yeah, because they're more guidelines.
My point is they're looking for the matchup. So they're like, all right, hypothetically, if they win here, all right, we don't want Texas to kill Utah or whoever.
There are more guidelines this year, obviously. Like the top 4, like whoever wins the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 get the buys. Whoever is the highest ranked G5 team is going to be the 12 seed. So 5 through 11, the committee, when it used to just be, all right, we're going to pick the top 4 and let you guys complain about it. Now they're going to try and decipher 5 through 11. And I can see where that could kind of come into play with what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you could have like a 3-loss Texas that didn't win the SEC. They might be the 7 seed because they could, in theory, match up with, I guess, like Ohio State at the 2 seed or whatever the case may be, whoever. I think that's what the committee's going to look for, is those matchups, because if it was up to them, Group of 5, I don't think would even be in consideration. I don't think if it was up to them, they'd rather put another Power 5 in.
Like a 5th
Power
SEC
4
Big 10 school. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So other than that parameter and the top 4 conference champions, it's free reign. And I think they're gonna wheel it and deal it. They know what they're doing, and I'm interested to see how that works, because I think those conversations, it's gonna turn into, from what it used to be with the 4 team, those arguments are gonna go from the 5 seed saying, how did we not get in? This is bananas. I don't get it. To the arguments of, how are we a 7 seed? Why do we have to stare down playing Georgia in our next game, or playing Ohio? Why do we have to do that when we have a better record than the 5 and the 6 seed? Those are the arguments that are going to happen. And don't worry, the 13 seed team will be, why didn't we get in? So you're just getting double the arguments at this point. But it's going to be fun.
The games are scrolling across the bottom of your screen for the week 2 games of interest across college football. Week 1 in the National Football League as well. And Ed, before I let you go, I'm going to get your take on the NFL. I'm going to run through my division winners. I'm going to run through my wild card teams, and I want you to react to them, okay? First thing I will tell you is that I think there are 2 divisions in football this year obviously one in each conference, that will have 3 playoff teams. AFC.
Okay.
AFC West, I think you're an idiot if you don't pick the Chiefs to win that division. So I'm picking the Chiefs to win that division. AFC East. I'm taking the Miami Dolphins. I like what they bring back. I like what they have offensively. I think Tyreek Hill is probably going to be the best receiver in football this year because Justin Jefferson's not going to have a quarterback, and the production I don't think is going to be very up to Justin Jefferson standards. A lot of hype around Indianapolis in the AFC South, but I still like CJ Stroud and the Texans, and their receiving core might be the best in football. In the AFC North, I am picking the Cincinnati Bengals to win the AFC North. Baltimore's good. I know you hate Lamar Jackson, but I'm higher thinking on Lamar Jackson than you are, but I think with a healthy Joe Burrow, this team wins a lot of close games and wins the AFC North. All right, my playoff teams. I have Baltimore. Obviously, they're a very, very talented football team, and it'll probably be the 5 seed. I have the Jets making the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers. I think that roster is too talented for them not to make the playoffs, especially that defense. And then my third playoff team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I have 3 out of the AFC North. You can react to that first.
I think you have the right 3 out of the AFC North. I don't think you have the right winner. I do think the Ravens are going to win the division.
Okay.
Because I think everybody is caught up in the fact that Burrow is back, as they should be. Cody Rhodes is back behind center.
On the flip side of that, they lose the middle of their defense in Patrick Queen, who's a Steeler, and their defensive coordinator is now the head coach of the Seahawks. So I think and they also lose Geno Stone in that secondary. I think the defense for Baltimore takes a little bit of a hit.
Sure it does. But here's the counterpoint, the point I was getting to with the Cincinnati. Everybody's enamored with Joe Burrow coming back, right? Everybody's so happy to see him back, and everyone's like, oh, well, that offense is going to go back to being the
he has blonde hair now, too. Did you see that?
I know. Cody Rhodes is behind center. But
yes.
Where's their defense? Who's their defensive,
I think Trey Hendrickson's a good pass rusher.
Okay. That's 1 out of 11. I mean, I don't think the defense has never, to me, been there. It's the reason why they're not the favorite every year. And there's a reason why in the AFC North, it's a conference, or it's a division that prides itself on that. I still think the Ravens have that. They still have Roquan Smith at the front as the centerpiece of their defense. Marlon Humphrey on the outside. And Harbaugh has been there for so long that, yes, coordinators matter, but at the same time, Harbaugh has a hand in that defense more than I think it's
going to come down to a game. I think one team is 13-4 and the other one's 12-5.
And I think that Cincinnati is not as well rounded as Baltimore is. But I'm not saying oh, you're an idiot for thinking Cincinnati's going to win it. They still got the same receivers. I think their running backs have always been interchangeable. Every time Mixon's been hurt, you always hear a name like Samaje Perine or whoever somehow comes out of nowhere. That offense just flows. It just does. I do think the Browns are the odd man out, and I think I'm not sold that the Steelers get in.
Neither am I.
But
I think Indianapolis will be on.
I think that's Mike Tomlin and the Steelers almost like it. It seems like when they're not talked about, when they're not, on Good Morning Football, and when they're doing their division picks and they're all picking the Steelers.
Well, Mike Tomlin likes when the national media says that he's never had a losing season. Did you know that? Did you know Mike Tomlin never had a losing season?
You're kidding. I mean, he's only been around. Yeah. No, I mean, other divisions are pretty self-explanatory. The only one, the AFC East, I think is interesting just with the Jets are the only, to me, the Jets are the only thing that can get in the way of the Dolphins winning that division.
Yeah.
Because I think the Bills are in for I think they're in for a rude awakening a little bit.
Yeah. I think Sean McDermott's going to coach his last games in Buffalo. I don't know
if I go that far, but I just think they're in for a 7-10. Or an 8.
Yeah, and 7-10 will get McDermott fired, absolutely. With how much they've underachieved, and then they blow kind of things up and let Diggs walk, and then if they're bad, I think they would hit the reset button on a head coach.
I do think the AFC
I
is
think
really
Keon
top
Coleman will
heavy.
be good. I think Keon Coleman will be really good.
I don't
But
think the AFC has a lot of mid-card talent per se. Like those teams that could contend in that 7 bracket, that 7 seed and be in the hunt per se. How many teams do you trust to be there by week 16? Do you trust the Raiders? Do you trust the Broncos?
No.
Do you trust
No.
the Patriots? Do you trust the Titans?
Patriots are going to have the number 1 overall pick. They're going to be terrible.
Yeah, maybe. But I'm just saying, like, the Steelers are one of those few teams that you just know are going to be in the mid-card. They're going to be in the mix. So that just automatically makes them a playoff contender because you just know they're going to be there. What they do when they get there, probably not much, but who knows?
Lose by 3 touchdowns to Kansas City or
whatever. Yeah.
Miami
or Houston, a young quarter, whatever. But I don't think, as far as your picks and division winners and playoff makers, all that lines up. It's just a matter of, I think you have the right 7. It's just a matter of what order they go in.
Yeah. NFC North. I'm intrigued by Caleb Williams in Chicago. I probably would have picked the Vikings if JJ McCarthy would have stayed healthy. Not necessarily because I think JJ McCarthy is going to be, some godsend, but I couldn't have thought of a better environment for a rookie quarterback to have come into than Minnesota with how good their offensive line is and the weapons they have surrounding the quarterback.
O'Connell's a friendly coach for
exactly. So I think they'll be in the hunt and in the mix with Sam Darnold, but I think Detroit is still too darn good, and I think they'll probably win the NFC North. Green Bay, though, will be close. That division is going to be really intriguing this year.
It'll be fun. That's why I don't think Chicago's not to the level of a Detroit or a Green Bay.
No.
So they'll have some fun moments. They might steal a game from those teams, but they're not.
If Caleb Williams is advertised with the amount of skill that they brought in to surround himself with, and it makes me feel bad for a guy like Justin Fields because, not saying that he had the chance to be as good as Caleb Williams does, but they didn't really give Justin Fields the opportunity to succeed because they didn't put anything else around him other than trade for DJ Moore. So I have the Lions winning the NFC North. NFC South, I think, is Atlanta's to lose. I'm intrigued by Tampa Bay. I think they'll have a chance to gun at the Falcons, but the Saints and the Panthers, I just think, are going to struggle. I think Derek Carr is almost at wit's end in New Orleans. The NFC East, I'll get to in a moment because I think one's a tough one. NFC West, San Francisco, and then the East, I have the Cowboys winning. I think Philadelphia is going to be really good. Kind of the same. I compare the NFC East to the AFC North and how I have them. Like I have Cincinnati obviously winning the AFC North, but Baltimore could easily do it. NFC East, I think Dallas is going to come out on top eventually after they all kind of beat each other up. But I could see Philadelphia winning that division as well with Saquon Barkley in that backfield. That defense is really good, obviously. And then Jalen Hurts with those receivers. Wild card teams, I have the Rams, the Eagles, and then the third division, or the other division I have with 3 teams is the NFC East. I think the Washington Commanders are the 7 seed. I, for whatever reason, am enamored with Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Dan Quinn is a hell of a ball coach and will coach up that defense. And I think that with the way it shakes out, like 9-8 probably gets you a 7 seed in the NFC. I think that the Commanders could find themselves, because they do have a favorable schedule by finishing as bad as they did. I think 9-8 and 10-7 is very reasonable for Washington this year with how good I think Daniels could be.
You remember how I said in the AFC side, there's no mid-carders or very few. So that 7 seed is going to come down to like maybe 1 or 3 teams.
Yeah.
Think about it on the NFC side. Seattle, Washington, maybe. Chicago, maybe. Tampa or Atlanta, whoever doesn't win that division, they're going to be in that like 500 range, if not maybe a little bit better or worse. That's 6 teams, those are all. And then there might be like a sleeper that comes out of nowhere, right? Washington is a good pick for that. I think I always thought they had a decent roster. They never had a roster to be the worst team in football. At least they haven't for the last handful of years. And honestly, last year I remember thinking to myself, if Sam Howell actually ends up being decent, they might not be that bad. And obviously that didn't work out. But if Jaden Daniels is good, same rule applies. So I think that's your riskiest pick. I don't think you disagree with me by saying that. But at the same time, you get risks with anybody else you put in that spot too. You put the Bears there, same deal. Good rookie quarterback, they could get in. Seattle, tough division, but their shine's kind of wearing a little bit, especially when you're in a division with the Rams and the Niners, and the Cardinals might sneak a game or two with Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray doing fun things. It's just somebody's got to be in that 7. And if you put Washington there, if you put Tampa there, if you put Seattle there, I wouldn't have batted an eye either way. I do think I wasn't expecting Washington, but I see it. I will say the one thing I do disagree with you about, the winner of if not the strongest division in football, the winner is going to be the Los Angeles Rams, I think. I think something's got to give for the Niners. I think through whether it's McCaffrey getting older and being a wear and tear and maybe injured, and not that I wish that, but he has a history. The whole Ayuk situation, like, is he gonna be 100% coming out the gate? Like, is he gonna?
Let me ask you. Let me follow up with you on that. I mean, do you think that we're still in a honeymoon kind of phase with Brock Purdy? Is there a chance that he falls out hard?
2 years of film on the guy now. Like, if there's gonna be a time when, they talk about it in baseball when the pitcher the Paul Skeens type, like, starts out really good, but then second year hitters know how to hit him. Like, I feel like that wall of reality is going to come down on Brock Purdy sooner or later. I don't know. And the Rams finished last year really strong. Matthew Stafford, I think, has somehow entered a category of being underrated at this point in his career. Yeah. I think nobody talks about him when it comes to being a good, steady, solid quarterback.
I think he's going to be in that class.
McVay is the man.
Oh, he's awesome. He's one of the best coaches in football. He's actually I would probably put him in the top 5.
He is the blueprint. He is the mold of how you would want a modern young head coach to be.
Sure. Yeah.
He was the first in that, like, trend.
You brought up Stafford. I think he's in that class of guys that just, like, you think of the generation we grew up with, Roethlisberger, Brady, Manning. Like, Eli Manning, it was kind of on that outside looking in at, like, really being elite. Same with Phillip Rivers. And I think Matthew Stafford falls kind of into that category as well. But in that category, like, if I were to lump him with Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Matthew Stafford, if I had to pick one of those guys to, like, start a team with in their prime, I take Stafford, and I don't even know if I think twice about it.
I don't. He's won a Super Bowl, and he's been there. He's been with that organization with McVay for years.
Yeah, and a lot wrong can happen between now and when the clock strikes midnight on Stafford, because you look at the way things ended with Eli Manning in New York, and Phillip Rivers was chased out of San Diego, or was it L.A. when he was
San Diego? He went from
I'm saying, was he an LA Charger, or was he only in San Diego?
Ooh, that's a good question. I can't remember off the top.
Whatever. I mean, he went to Indianapolis.
He ended as a Colt. Everybody always ends. Somehow, everybody's career always goes to die in the AFC South. Somehow, it's either the Titans, the Colts. I don't know who it is, but their career always goes to die in the AFC South.
I think I think there's a real chance you get to that point with the Steelers too. I mean, the Steelers went from in 2021, Roethlisberger started week 1. In 2022, it was Trubisky, then Pickett, and now it's going to be Russell Wilson. 4 different week 1 starters in 4 years. And we said that about, oh my God, it's Indiana's like that now. Or the Indianapolis is like that now. Could you imagine? Now, all of a sudden, I mean, you're a Steelers fan and so am I. So we're just like, oh, this is what that feels like.
Yeah. Consistency would be nice, but
all right. Before I let you go, let me get your overall synopsis on what you think the Steelers are going to do this year, and do you think Russell Wilson finishes the year as the starter? I mean, if Justin Fields starts, like, he might just be due to injury. Do you think Wilson gets benched for Fields at all during the season?
If Russell Wilson doesn't get hurt, I don't think you see Fields as a consistent starter. I think they want to keep Wilson in there. I think they want Justin Fields to sit. I think they want consistency. The Steelers have gone, like you said, 4 years straight of just when was the last time the same quarterback started all 16 games or 17 games, I guess now for the Steelers? It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened for a while. And I think this Mike Tomlin knows, and I think the Steelers organization, they love them some consistency, right? They're the model of it. They love the standard is the standard.
If you will.
If you will. So they want Wilson in there, is what I think. They were
Big Ben started all 16 back in 2018.
Okay. So
and then the year afterwards, they were in quarterback hell when Ben got hurt in game 2.
Rudolph, Duck, the whole deal. My point is that you saw you were there, how careful they were with him in training camp as far as tendering to his, potential injuries and just his age. And I think they've been so careful with him because they want him to go the distance. If they have to put Fields in, I think they'll make that call. And they've shown that they will do that. If Wilson plays so poorly, I think they'll do that. However, if it gets to the point where Wilson's throwing for like 150, 200 yards a game, maybe a touchdown, maybe 2 and a pick, but they're 6-2 or they're 5-3, he ain't coming out.
Nope.
I think they just need that to be his mold. And I think they'll be happy with it as long as they're winning games. They don't care. It made famous in the 2008 Steelers Super Bowl DVD. Mike Tomlin said style points don't matter. And I still think he thinks that. So will they use Fields? Absolutely. Tomlin already hinted to packages you're going to see week 1 in Atlanta, which is cool. I think they should use him like that.
He's too athletic for you not to.
And his youth it's on a timer. He's not going to have his legs forever if he's going to be here long term if they want him to be. But as far as this season alone, I do think Wilson is, if it was up to them and everything falls in the right place, he will finish the year. But it goes back to something we said at the start of this conversation. If you told me to put money on Russell Wilson playing 17 games, I don't know if I'd do it. But I'm interested to see it. And I do think that Arthur Smith at least knows that he's not going to rely on Russell Wilson to be the offense. It's not going to be the Seattle show like it was 10 years ago. They're gonna pound Warren and Hart and Najee Harris. They're gonna use, I think Pat Freiermuth's in for a big year. I think there's I think part of the reason that you don't see as much talent on the outside is because they're going to use what they have lined up next to the tackle. You'll see the receivers, obviously, but I think there's a reason why that they didn't seem too concerned about how they were at receiver because they're not going to use them that much. So will that win? Yet to be seen. But
yeah, and Mike Tomlin mentioned that in his press conference today about the receivers group and that they're excited for Roman Wilson and they're good at not drafting receivers that aren't in the first round. So that's obviously remained to be seen, but I'm with you. I think Pat Freiermuth is in for one heck of a football year.
I'm interested to see it. And I do think that they're going to be right there as they always are because that defense is still really good. That defense added and they're really good. I'm glad that they they truly did address needs. Whether they work out or not is yet to be seen, but they got a second safety alongside Minka with Deshaun Elliott. A guy like a Ryan Clark, I kind of group in with Elliott, where is he going to be the number one name you think of when you think Steelers safety? No, but can he get the job done? Yet to be seen, but I think that's what they want him to do. Same thing with Dante Jackson. Corner number 2 next to Joey Porter, veteran guy, help him out. He's still got some legs on him. I didn't mind that acquisition.
A lot of people are
and obviously Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are concerned too about slot corner with Beanie Bishop. But that was one of the things that kind of Tomlin dismissed today too. I think Beanie Bishop will play a lot, but I think there will be packages for the nickel and the dime where there are 3 safeties on the field, where like Fitzpatrick might be your slot corner, or DeMonte KZ might be that guy, and all 3 between KZ, Elliott, and Minka are on the field at the same time, and Beanie Bishop might not be. So that'll be remain to be seen as well. But I'm going 10-7. That is my jacked up record prediction right here, right now.
I'll agree. I think
right.
if I'd have known, I would have done. I love doing that NFL season predictor website where they lay out all the games. So I'm yet to do that until Thursday.
I'll do it probably Wednesday night or Thursday before the first game.
I'll probably do it once I get all my stuff, all my stories done for like either tomorrow or Thursday. But just getting to do that's going to be awesome. But I would agree. I think 10-7 is a good range to expect. And I don't think you should expect more than that just based on the division they're in. I don't think 11-12 wins is just plausible with the gauntlet they have to go through in their own division, not to mention, they're playing just their normal schedule, which we already, kind of went all over. So yet to be seen. A lot of question marks, but you're not a football team if you don't have them. So that's just a cool thing to talk about.
Well, we've gone for about 45 minutes. I'll give you one more round of applause. WLOS, DiOrio.
I was wondering how long this was going to go. We could go long.
We could have.
You got some other things to do tonight, I'm sure. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for taking some time. Miss you. Appreciate you. Just about 5 weeks until the boys' trip to Vegas for Steelers Raiders. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you. That'll be a fun time.
Likewise. And who knows? Maybe we'll see Justin Fields there. I don't know. We'll yet to be seen. Well, I guess maybe I'll have to come back at the end of the year to see if all of what we talked about, all the predictions, were a boom or a doom. Come on, man.
All right. I appreciate you, man. We'll talk to you.
I miss you, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Yep.